high school? Do you want to be a detective or a cop, or are you into sports, or what did you want to be? Like, like I say, what did you want to be when you were growing up?
Well, ironically, in high school, I was into smoking weed. So I didn't have, I was just kind of a little bit of a vagabond, and went to high school, hung out with my friends, drank beer, went to parties, just like, most of the kids were doing. But I didn't have a lot of direction. I didn't have a lot of aspirations. I wasn't very good in sports. I participated in sports, but I was mostly on the sideline. And then a really good friend of mine, my closest friend, Todd, was really good in sports. And we were on the same sporting teams. And his father became kind of a mentor for me. And Todd had gone off to college and broke his neck playing football. Yeah, he snapped his neck. And so I moved in with him and his family to help kind of take care of him during his rehabilitation. And he ended up being paralyzed.
Sorry to hear that.
But his dad, who was always kind of looking, at me with some concern, was like, Greg, you've kind of got to get your shit together. You can't just stay here forever. And he was a lieutenant on the sheriff's department at the time, so he kind of just was nudging me like, I can help you along here if you like. And I thought, I appreciate that. That's probably a good idea. So I took advantage of the opportunity and then applied for the sheriff's department, and that's how I started my career.
For all the Tupac and Biggie, what was your first biggest case where you're like, oh shit, this is real?
So I remember when I really felt like I had accomplished what I wanted to was when I got into gangs. And we used to have this assignment that's called Crash. And Crash was an anti-gang unit. So I had spent a year and a half working as a patrol officer. And then I got recruited into Crash. And that was like really when it all got like, this is some cool shit. I really, really dug it. I was working around some really good cops. It was a really proactive position. We're out there grinding in the streets, and it was a really fun work environment. And this was back in the late 80s. And so, we were just getting it on out there, and it was fun.
There are a lot of guys that you had put away you're still friends with.
Yeah, a handful. Some guys, as you're going through the process of the prosecution and you're developing a rapport with them, because it's not supposed to be personal. And most of the time they respect you're just doing your job if you're doing it right. And, you recognize that they're just doing what they're doing. You don't support it or agree with it, but it doesn't have to become this personal issue. And so it always worked out best for me to just build, a
rapport. Yeah.
Like, this is what's up. I'll be honest with you. Hopefully you be honest with me. And we always tried to help each other out the best we could under the circumstances. So I built a good relationship with people who turned out to be, aside from some of the decision making they made, in their life, really decent individuals. People that I could actually say, a really interesting enigma, really. He's a guy I think was really looking for a place to call home. And I think he thought he found that at death row, with Suge Knight kind of as a mentor. But I think he was always looking for that sense of loyalty that comes with, family, which he didn't have. And so I think that was one of the things that allowed him to be vulnerable, but also one of the things that allowed him to be vulnerable with the wrong people.
He goes to Quad Studio, and he gets shot 5 times. Slide 3. He gets shot 5 times, and then he goes to court, I think, 2 days after the shooting.
Right.
And he thinks it's P. Diddy or Diddy and Biggie. Later, he finds out it wasn't.
Yeah, so he suspects that those guys maybe didn't have anything to do with setting him up, but that they knew about it and either didn't warn him or found out about it after the fact and didn't tell him who it was. And so, his perspective is like, again, where's the loyalty? I'm coming over here, we're working together, and it's cool, I'm helping you, you're helping me, and then this happens, and who do I trust? I can't trust you, obviously, because you guys knew about this and didn't do anything to warn me.
Because him and Biggie were really close at one time.
Yeah, I talked to Valletta about this, and she goes, man, Pac would come over and sleep on our couch, and they were like that. They were as close as They were really close. Get shot 5 times.
He didn't?
No.
How many times did he get shot?
He shot himself.
Tupac shot himself?
And then he got pistol whipped, and he suffered several huge lacerations on his head, which is why he's bandanaed the next day when he goes to court.
Wow, I always thought he got shot in the head.
I'm sorry, not bandana, but he had bandages on his head.
I thought he got shot in the balls, the head, and the 3 other. He got shot in the balls, right?
He did. It's because he had a gun of his own.
Yeah.
And in the in the chaos of the robbery and the confrontation, he's trying to pull his own gun out of his waistband. Hawk was under Interscope.
Right.
And so it was actually Interscope's idea that, hey, this guy who's this incredible talent that's languishing away in jail would really probably be a good fit over here with this rap label in Los Angeles, Death Row. And so it was really the corporate executive's idea that this might work really good. And so they suggest it, and Suge's like, yeah, I'm all about that.
Okay.
So he then goes and makes the offer and represents it as, hey, we can get you out. And they do.
And they get him out. Now, he signed so many albums with Death Row to do...
I think it was 3.
3?
Yeah.
Okay.
To satisfy the agreement.
Agreement for the million. But nothing was really in his name. Did you see that in the finals? Like, the car wasn't in his name?
So this is what Suge used to do. He would give people gifts and help them get houses and whatever, but it was always working towards their own royalties. So they thought that these are the benefits of being involved in this really successful record label, but other people are keeping track of what you've been given and what you're spending, and then using that back against your own, profits.
Tupac thinking that P. Diddy and Biggie set him up. So there's one at this time.
That was in 94.
Right. Then in 95, Suge Knight and Suge Knight's bodyguard gets killed by Diddy's bodyguard, right? Diddy's bodyguard shoots Suge Knight's bodyguard.
Yes, that's
95.
Nobody was ever convicted or even arrested on that case, but according to all the collective information, that's the most likely scenario. Diddy and Suge are at a nightclub in Atlanta. They get into a small little confrontation inside the club. An off-duty cop says, y'all need to take this shit outside, kicks everybody out, but he holds Tupac and Suge and his entourage back because he wants to get a little separation between the groups. So he sends everybody outside. When Suge and Jay Robles get out there, those other guys are still there. So it picks up right where it left off. A gun gets pulled out. Jake gets shot. Some people say that the guy was actually going to attempt to shoot Suge, and Jake did his job and jumped in front of Suge, took the bullet for him, or Jake just ends up in the line of fire. So there's a little bit of a foot pursuit. Everyone disappears. They're never able to figure out what happened, but presumably it was Diddy's bodyguard.
Right. So now you have like the cocktail for the perfect disaster about to happen.
Exactly.
You got Tupac thinking this, Suge thinking this. Now they're together.
Yep.
It's a matter
Perfect
of time.
storm.
Perfect storm, right.
Yep.
Okay. Now, they go to the MGM, the Tyson fight, okay? And prior to that, somebody had stole a death row chain, at a strip mall. And somebody says to Tupac at the Tyson fight at the MGM, hey, that's the guy who stole my chain. Is
Correct.
that accurate?
Yeah, so Tupac's walking out. He's all pumped up. He just comes out of the arena. He knows Mike Tyson personally, right? So they run into a guy named Orlando Anderson. Orlando Anderson is a guy who tried to steal a death row medallion about 3 months earlier. And so Trayvon Lane, was the bearer of that medallion, says, yo, there's that motherfucker basically that tried to steal my chain. Pac takes it upon himself to go over there and sucker punch Orlando. The rest of the mob Pyrus and the rest of the entourage jump in and start kicking the shit out of him. And that sets everything in motion for what will happen in a couple hours.
Yeah. Okay, so now that happens. Okay, so now they leave the fight. They're going to Suge's Club 662, right?
Right.
They're on the way. Orlando Anderson's pissed. They're on the hunt for him.
Right.
They're in the white Cadillac. They make the U-turn. Whatever, people are hollering. They pull up, pop, hit Pac, and graze Suge.
Right.
Do you think that Suge knew any, like, why not hit Suge and Tupac? Why just blast Tupac and Suge only gets a graze?
So think about, put yourself in the mind of the shooter.
Mm-hmm.
The shooter knows that that's the motherfucker that just attacked me. Even though the rest of them jumped in, he's like, he started it. He's the one who ran up to me first and hit me. So that's where his focus is, right? He doesn't care about Tupac as a, multi-million-dollar, artist. He's just like, he's from the streets of Compton. That dude assaulted me. You're gonna pay. So his focus is there, but he's just shooting. You look at the bullet spread on the side of it. It's not accurate. It's just he happened to hit Tupac, and one of the bullets happened to be fatal. So it just he'd have been happy to shoot Suge too. Not be the brightest, tack in the drawer a bit. He's smart enough not to put himself right in the line of fire.
Yeah.
If you're gonna have somebody drive up and shoot your number one artist, which doesn't make sense to begin with, you certainly don't sit on the opposite side of him where, 2 inches to the left and he's dead too.
The case in 06,
mm-hmm.
What's the theory that lands on your lap of who killed Tupac? When you get the case.
When we get the case, we believed it was either, the strongest theory was obviously the Orlando Anderson Southside Crips. We just saw Orlando Anderson getting the shit kicked out of him 2 hours before the shooting. We knew that him and his Crip friends were all there at the fight, and that we're staying in Vegas. So most of the evidence was pointing directly at the Southside Crips, and so that was the working theory. The other one that was kind of a weaker theory was the Suge Knight one, where Tupac was going to leave, and Suge Knight figured I can make more money off him if he's dead as opposed to being gone. So that was the kind of second, but it's a weak theory. It's one that wasn't really well entertained because there was no evidence to support it. And the motive was weak. There was no evidence. So it had always, and by Las Vegas themselves, they were always pretty confident that Orlando Anderson was, in fact, their shooter. They just in the best position to shoot because, of course, Terrence Brown is driving. Tupac's out to the left side of the vehicle. DeAndre is right behind the driver. He's in the best position to shoot. DeAndre's like, nah, no thanks. I'm not here for that. And so Orlando takes the gun, which makes sense because he was the one that just got stomped. He says, give me that motherfucker. And he grabs it and he leans over DeAndre out the window and starts popping and shoots and ultimately kills Tupac.
And that was the end of that.
That was it.
Now, the wire from Diddy was never proven, right?
We don't know if there's a wire, a check, if it was ever paid. This is all just rumor. Keefe D heard from several different people who were in a position to know this. They weren't just random people. They were people that were associated with Zip. And the story is that after the hit, that Diddy had given Zip half the money that was discussed, and Zip just kept it.
Took it all. And is it true that Diddy had called and said, "Hey, was that you guys?" Do you have that factual?
The very following day. Well, this is Keefe D's story.
Okay.
It's never been corroborated by cell phone records or anything because we're getting this information 2008, 2009, so 12 years after the fact. And so we, couldn't go back and see whether these phone calls actually happened. But according to Keefe D, who's in a position, he's compelled to tell the truth about what he knows. It's like, hey, the next day after Vegas, I get a phone call. It's actually Puffy calling Zip saying, hey, was that us? Obviously aware that Tupac had been shot in Vegas. So. For Diddy, he was in a very, very difficult situation. The conflict that had been growing between him and Suge was getting out of control. As we mentioned earlier, a bodyguard of his was believed to have shot Suge's bodyguard. Blood was on the ground. It's getting really hostile. Suge kidnaps an associate of his, trying to find out where Diddy's house is in L.A. so he can go track him down. Like, this is real for Diddy. He's like, man, if I go to L.A., I got a target on my back, and, I'm desperate. And out of that desperation, he's talking to Keefe D and having a conversation about this conflict. I think he's just having exaggerated speech, like, man, motherfucker, take care of these dudes. I don't, just whatever, make it go away. I don't think that he's sitting there saying, listen,
go kill him.
Let's have a, yeah.
Yeah.
But he's talking to a guy who does this type of stuff and is associated with people who do this stuff. Orlando was wanted for other murders at the time. So I think he, probably was a little too loose-lipped, and out of desperation made comments that led Keefe D to believe that he could collect on this. And they had reason to now because Orlando had just gotten stomped. So just on principle, Tupac was going to get shot that night, aside from any financial conversation that had happened earlier, just on principle. But then Keefe D's thinking, well, shoot, 2 birds with 1 stone, we'll take advantage of this.
Have any different opinion? Do you think that Diddy did put out there $10,000 per death row chain?
That's just a street rumor. We've never corroborated it. The Mob Piru Bloods on the street were actually aware of this rumor, believing it to be true. But these are street rumors, and they're very difficult to corroborate. We certainly don't have any evidence that it took place, but people were acting as if it were true.
One of those things, right?
Yeah, one of those things.
So now, were you ever able to go ahead, I'm sorry.
To kind of reinforce that, just the confrontation at the mall where a guy's death row medallion is attempting to be stolen kind of shows you that that the rumor certainly was believed to be true by those who were, on the receiving end. I don't like or dislike him. I don't appreciate him because of the fact that he didn't fully cooperate with the investigation. So I don't respect him for that. But I'm not going like it. I want to be convinced that somebody's guilty of something before I allude to the idea that they're guilty of something.
And that's why you're so good, really, because no offense, but Poole, it seemed to me like he would do a case. This is just my opinion. I'm not bad-mouthing anybody. It just seems maybe he took what he got, slapped it together. Okay, this is what happened. Boom, on to the next one. That's kind of how it seemed to me. Whereas you seem like I don't have anything bad to say about Diddy. I don't have anything good to say about Diddy. Wish he would have cooperated or helped us out more. But because I don't have solid facts, I'm not going to sit here and say he did do this or he did do that.
Yeah.
You're a factual investigator, not like some of these other investigators.
Yeah, because it's I think that it's important, as a cop, obviously to find the guilty party, but also exonerate the innocently accused, because that happens too. And we don't fully take time to appreciate the kind of turmoil that can create in a person's life, just by reputation, just by, the illusion. You've got a reputation, even if it's untrue, that negatively affects everything else you do in your life.
So basically, Suge gets the girl to come in, arranges the hit with Poochie. Poochie's the trigger man, kills Biggie. That's the case in a nutshell, right?
Yeah. I think Poochie was directly involved in this thing. It made a lot of sense because Poochie had a long history of, gang violence and had done other type of, contractual work for Suge before. And so it made a lot of sense. He fit right into the profile of who your shooter would be. Nobody's ever identified him there. And he's dead, so it's not like we can go press up on him. But of all collective information in the case, it's the most viable working theory.
Right.
Tupac's is pretty,
cut and dry.
That's obvious. There's a variable there, and we don't know who the other person could have been. Suge Knight could have solved Tupac's murder that night. All he had to do was tell the detectives, man, them motherfuckers, that was Keefe D. I've known him since I was a kid. I looked right in his eyes. I've seen them coming. That was Keefe D in the car, and it would have been it. They would have had all the evidence they needed right then to go make arrests. So Suge Knight could have solved it that night. He chose not to. In his own words, I don't get paid. So.